All right, thank you for joining us today. And I'll call the April 13th, 2023 meeting of the Police Advisory and Oversight Board to order. So let's begin with an introduction of the members present today.
Conrad Thomas.
Lucretia King.
Joanna Johnson.
Dave Hoganson.
Tanya Graywind.
And I think on the line we have Todd and Scott.
That's correct.
Todd Spellberg.
Okay. Okay. The next item on the agenda is to approve the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of the agenda, say aye.
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 Okay. Opposed, same sign. Okay. The motion's carried. The next item on the agenda is approving the minutes of the March 9th, 2023 Advisory and Oversight Board meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Can I get a
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Oh, okay. Motion will be carried. The next item is to approve the minutes of the March 29th, 2023 working session meeting. Can I get a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll move to approve those minutes.
I second.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed, same sign? No? Okay. The next item is public comment, and those who wish to address the Police Advisory and Oversight Board must use the sign-in sheet. Speakers will state their name and are limited to 3 minutes. Comments should not contain profanity or personal attacks. And do we have anyone signed up?
Yes, good evening. Good evening, everybody. We have 2 folks. First one is Christopher Cohn.
Hi, I'm Christopher Cohn, a Fargo resident. Pronounce he, him, his. And at last month's meeting, I suggested advising the city commission to have the Fargo police study what members of the community may not be able to respond to commands by police officers and who may have difficulty responding to commands. Also, at the listening session, I brought up this issue, and I pointed out that people with PTSD have a very strong flee or fight response when they're threatened and are not able to respond to commands, and that I've heard that Shane Netterville, who was killed last July, had PTSD, and I suggested that once again, I suggested that this be looked into and look at what members of the community, other than those with PTSD, might not be able to respond to commands, maybe people who are deaf, etc. And then at the working session, supposedly all of you are going to be talking about our comments, but I didn't hear that comment talked about, so it was ignored. So, once again, I'm saying, I think that the city commission ought to be advised to have the police look into this. I mean, after all, you guys are the advisory and oversight committee, but you haven't done any advice. You haven't advised them to do anything. And as far as, that tragic loss of life last July, it's really the easiest thing for the police to do, to just say, to take no responsibility at all and just say, it was the fault of the person who didn't respond to the command. And, we had every right to detain him because there was a bullet hole in the windshield. And he was going to get shot if he didn't stop. But that doesn't help us prevent tragedies in the future. And I think every single tragedy that we have, we ought to study with the idea of how do we prevent these tragedies from happening again. And I also suggest making a trip to Shane Netterville's grave Now, I went there, I asked his brother, who's up here in front every session, if I could come along to a ceremony they had at the grave, and it really made it visceral, the loss of this young man's life. So I would suggest maybe talk to his brother and see if you can go there. And we really appreciate the loss of life. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Victoria Johnson.
Madam Chair and member of the commission, my name is Victoria. First, I just wanted to come up here and say thank you for hosting the last listening session, and that I think there was a great turnout. I didn't expect that much people coming, but I wish that we could have listened to everybody in that room, sharing their thoughts and give up some ideas on what this advisory could take into consideration and pass it along to the police department. So I just wanted to come up here and give my own personal opinion, and maybe you guys can take into consideration if you decided to host another listening session, and maybe doing it as a table talk and using the table talk format. When you do that, you have more control of the discussion, and you're able to create what are you trying to look for? What's the outcome are you trying to get from the listening session? So you have a problem, and you also have the audience come up with the solution. That way you're engaging people, and everybody in the room can participate and actually be part of the conversation. And I love that listening session using the table talk style, because I have done it. With my organization, we have so much parents that you have 2 or 3 parents will talk about the same thing, but you don't hear from everybody else. But when we changed it, we were able to get everybody to talk, and everybody was able to give us their input to the concerns they were having. And you were able to engage with everybody in the room, and everybody feeling that they're part of the discussion and not just be afraid, because not everybody can stand up and speak. And so that just gives more opportunity for the community member and people who are in the room to be able to engage and have a conversation and share what their views are, or their opinions, or their ideas, the solution to the problem, right? And so I hope you'll take that in consideration next time you do that, and not do an open mic. Anybody can just come in and talk, because you're gonna get the same people talking, and you're not going to get everybody in the room engaged and talking and sharing ideas and concerns and, solution to what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is department updates. Chief, do you have some department updates for us?
I think the only update this evening is just to advise the board and invite them to the swearing ceremony next Wednesday, the 19th at 9 a.m. at City Hall. We'll be swearing in 9 new officers. We have a couple of promotions as well. And then our next academy is set to start May 15th. And we're completing the interviews and background processes for that academy. So we're making good progress in that area. And I think that's it for updates at this juncture.
All right, thank you. The next item on the agenda was the board discussion of a working session. And I think we were going to be talking about a date for possibly doing, during our working session, we had talked about some off-site engagement activity type, getting us out there and talking, and right? And we were talking about doing a training, doing some traffic stop information, and we were looking at maybe doing that a couple of different dates, or picking a date, right? I think there was discussion if we wanted to do that at our next meeting date, or the meeting date in June. I think it's still the second Thursday, is that correct, Chief, the dates that were available?
Yes. You could do it during one of your regular sessions if you like, or we could plan a separate day to do that presentation because we estimated it probably be about 90 minutes.
Right, and I think we were kind of talking, maybe we'd like to do something sooner, because I think there is a consensus of wanting to engage more with the community during these kind of sessions where we were, and also where the community can be more engaged with the demonstration or the presentation, right?
Yes, yeah, Madam Chair, I believe that what we had started the discussion on was just determining the date, whether it would be in lieu of our meetings like the chief had said, or if we would have a separate date to demo first one, so, yep.
Right. Has anybody had any thoughts about that? I believe Scott was in favor of the May. Is that correct, Scott?
Yeah, that's correct. May 11th.
Todd, did you have any preference or ideas about the engagement training,
Nope, I'm good with that.
the May date?
That's fine with me.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Yep, we
Okay,
can hear you.
perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm gonna mute again.
Okay.
What date in May was that again? Do we know?
The 11th.
May 11th.
May 11th.
And then could I ask, would that be a 5 o'clock start time?
Like a 5 to 6:30?
Sure. Yeah, that works for the board, yes. And then Christie's working on a location other than city chambers, so we'll be going out, I believe, south end of town. She had some opportunities there to host this.
And Chief, could you maybe give us, as a board, a little, just a reminder of what this kind of off-site engagement training would look like?
Sure. It's really an opportunity to kind of educate the public and also take questions on one of the issues in which there's a lot of conflict between police and community members, traffic stops. There's a lot of misinformation in terms of what can and can't be done, how the police should actually do things, what citizens who are driving are responsible to do, those types of things, the related case law behind all of that. So we provide a presentation on all of those things, take questions and answers from the community throughout the process so they better understand all of those different components. I think we found it to be a very engaging and really good learning opportunity, not only for regular community members, but new drivers especially that might not have had any of this information in the basic driving school. But it's an area that, again, a lot of conflict happens between law enforcement and the community. And so I think it's that educational piece that helps better so that everyone better understands what their roles and responsibilities are on both sides, how the police should approach the stop, what the citizens' obligations and rights are, and those types of things.
And then this would be a setting outside of here, more of a community setting to where everyone can be more engaged in the conversation. Is that correct?
Right. Our goal, as we discussed, was to move those types of educational opportunities around the city so that we can engage different areas, different neighborhoods, and try and get more people involved at a city level. And those types of locations tend to bring in people, depending on if we're in a school or some other library, some public location that people are comfortable attending. And then we get to those different neighborhoods within the city and we draw in folks from those different areas.
Chief, outside the oral presentation, will there be visual presentation or slides and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a PowerPoint presentation that we present and we provide all of the legal citations. A lot of times we'll have people in there that will wonder, okay, where did this law come from and so forth. So we provide that, again, as an educational piece to the public so that they understand that actually this is the statutory citation or this is the Supreme Court case law that provides that authority. They're not just things that, cops or people makeup in general. So it's a good opportunity for people to be educated on that.
Okay. So a couple of things, I guess. One of the things is to vote on the day. Do we need to vote on the day? Is that appropriate, Nancy?
Yeah, I don't know that that's an action item needed
Okay.
from the board. I think it's just to set it, and then we'll,
Okay.
make sure that there's notice provided.
Okay. So are we in agreement to the May date for that?
I have no problems with it.
Yeah. Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right, so our next meeting will be in that setting, so we can experience one of these off-site engagement trainings and get maybe some of the community to show up, get involved, ask the questions, maybe learn more about what's involved. And then we were also going to talk about maybe what some future agenda topics were, and I think there was, from my understanding, during our working session, that there were some topics, that were brought up, and I know we were listening during our listening session. We were listening, and we had some ideas, but I think, Chief, we had kind of talked about maybe some other kind of options or things that were brought up during that maybe we could address in some of these settings in a more public space.
Yeah, we talked about presentations on use of force. We talked about information such as we're going to talk about today, I guess, in terms of mental health calls for service. Updates on legislation was asked about. The CRITAC review, which is still pending. If there's an update there, we certainly would have that ready to go. Hiring and recruitment was questions that we wanted to push out to the community. I think those were the main topics that we discussed in terms of future educational opportunities.
Chief, also, I just want to get some clarification. I believe with the topics regarding force, de-escalation would be part of that subtopic, I would assume.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, we would cover our the overview of the course the de-escalation course and training that we receive as part of that use of force. Correct.
All right. And so one of the things we talked about is setting up, right, an agenda with these topics out so we know what's coming, and then it also lets the community maybe be a little bit aware too of what's coming. Would we be able to set up a schedule for some of these things? Of course, pending something happening in the community that we need to address more urgently, but would we be able to set this up and display this in such a way that the public would be able to see the schedule or the agenda? So, people would know when to come or...
Sure. Yeah, no, I think if the board wants to lay out the timeframes with the specific topics, we could certainly agendize those ahead of time. Sure, absolutely. And then I think the location, again, as we discussed, we'd like to move the locations around, again, to just engage different areas of the city as we do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, so we're going to do this session with the traffic stops the next time, but I do believe the use of force is something that is also something we want to be able to discuss, right, of priority?
Yes.
Yeah, I think, Madam Chair, I think we were talking about prioritization and how we were going to prioritize those topics that kind of came to the top during the conversation, and some of the things that I had shared during just in the notes that I had taken, I think kind of echoed a lot of what had come across in the notes that were for the meeting. So I don't know, as far as that list, maybe we could ask that we have that list to give so that we can prioritize during our next meeting when we're together, to say what comes next and what we think is the most important thing to vote for. If I may suggest that.
That's a good suggestion. Any input from anyone? Anyone have any ideas on that?
I think it's a good suggestion. I'm also trying to figure out how there could be a consensus that's involved with not just this board here, but also the community, people who are voicing some of their opinions. And we took what they had mentioned and recorded it. Now it comes a time where we now need to look at it and see, like, as you say, how do we prioritize? Because it's not just what we consider as important, but it's also what the community consider as important as well.
I think that's where some of those agenda items were coming from, right?
That's correct.
From the listening session in particular, you know. But again, pending anything in the community we need to address urgently, you know. Having an agenda would at least give, I think, the community a heads up to what to attend, if we could find a way to disseminate that information. Yeah.
If I may suggest also just something else to consider as we go out and do this first presentation. Usually we end with an opportunity for those there to provide input on other topics that they would like to see in the future as well. So that's a really good opportunity to utilize the attendees in that fashion and get those ideas, and then try and see what the most prevalent ones are to help with that prioritization.
Right. Anything else on that discussion?
Conrad, were you thinking of doing some sort of like a poll to allow the community to sort of prioritize, or at least to have an opinion on the topics?
Well, I think what the chief just mentioned may be an avenue where we can now try to parlay what's being discussed and eventually prioritize what some of the issues may be. Maybe we'll use that as a platform, maybe, and then we'll see how that goes, and then maybe let's see if it meets what the community thinks in terms of we are addressing some of the concerns and issues, or if not, then how we adjust so that we can start showing that there's some teeth to what this community, this advisory board is.
Sure. Would we have would it be possible, Chief, to consider, once we have, you know, the list, the official list of the topics, to maybe use social media or something to allow people to vote for, you know, so that we would kind of be able to see where the biggest, I don't know if social media is the right place, but just have a place for them to be able to help to make that decision so that we could help to prioritize.
We probably could do that. Not everyone uses social media.
Very true.
So we're cutting, I mean, I would suggest do what we're doing, and I think the board really is the decision makers on prioritization, right?
Sure.
But we can probably do that in social media if you would like. We could look into that, you know, and put a bunch of topics out and see what we get for response as well.
Okay. All right, so our next meeting, where it'll be is yet to be determined, but the next meeting will be an off-site engagement training. At our next meeting, the May meeting. right? All righty. Are we ready to move on?
Can I just clarify? Do you want to set June's addenda, June as the use of force presentation, just so that we can make sure that we're prepared? Or do you want to have further discussion on that?
What do you guys think? I mean, I do feel like that, we did hear a fair amount about that during our listening session.
Yeah, I agree. I think
Yeah.
use of force and de-escalation and
Yeah, the de-escalation training.
is something that is very important within this community, so
Yeah.
it should be
I would agree.
priority.
Yeah, I agree. And when we get into use of force, we've heard from a lot of community members about what does de-escalation look like and how are officers trained in recognizing people who may not be as communicative or may be suffering from a PTSD or something. And so there seems to be a keen interest in that. So hopefully that can be a component of it.
Right. Well, I think the presentation itself provides an opportunity for those Q&A questions from the audience. So I think that's a great idea. I mean, we'll be able to, the presenters will be able to take whatever questions come relative to all those different issues around use of force.
Okay.
All right. So the June meeting will be the use of force. Next month is the off-site engagement training on traffic stops, right? So we have that.
I agree, yeah.
Okay. All right, well, I guess the next item on the agenda is, I think Chief Zapolsky was gonna do a presentation on the crime statistics.
So this essentially is the same presentation that was given to the commission on, I believe, April 3rd. So this is 2022 to 2021 crime statistics. And overall, crime was down 7% in Fargo compared to 2021, so that was very positive. There's a couple of areas as you look at this chart. On the left is crimes against persons. And some things that we're doing very well on, but there's some other areas that we're going to be focusing on, the aggravated assaults and the rapes, which still have a high percentage rate. So that's been an area of focus for the department that will continue into this year. Our homicides are down, and within that aggravated assault count is also your shootings and shots fired. And as we previously explained, this is oftentimes misunderstood by the community in terms of what's a shooting, what's a shots fired, what does it mean? And so a shots fired, and we have a graphic up on that coming up as well, is an incident in which someone fires a gun, but no one is hit. They might hit a house, they might hit a car, they might shoot into the air and hit nothing. Those are shots fired crimes that will fall in that 486 aggravated assaults, and it's a very small percentage of that number, but we break them out because of the significance with the firearms. And then the shootings are even a smaller part of that aggravated assault number, and that is an incident where someone is actually hit by gunfire. Not a BB gun, but an actual firearm. Those are shooting incidents. And so we'll cover that in a little more detail in a second, but I just want to differentiate that. On the right, crimes against society or narcotics, prostitution, things of that nature. So on the crimes against persons, there's a small decrease of 0.2%. There's a 9% decrease in the crimes against society. The biggest area of change for us was crimes against property, which is a 9% reduction. The biggest one in that really is the burglaries at 24%. So that's a really good reduction in burglaries across the board there. That's pretty significant. People are also concerned when their houses and things like that are getting broken into, so we're pretty happy with that. We'd like to keep those numbers going in that same direction. And here again is the total overview. So all of those categories that we just talked about are referred to as Group A offenses in the incident-based reporting system. That's the National Incident-Based Reporting System that we've been using for several years. That's what the FBI now uses, and was the standard, I believe, since January 1 of 2021. Not all departments have made that conversion yet, but we have made that conversion and have been contributing data to that, to the incident-based reporting system, which is different from the old system, which was referred to as summary reporting. So in the old system, it didn't count every offense. So if you had, for instance, a bank robbery in which someone was killed, you had a bank robbery, you had a homicide or a murder. In the summary reporting, it just counted the murder and the bank robbery didn't show up. So incident-based reporting is more robust in that it counts all of those incidents. So the numbers are larger in general, but as you go from year to year, and we're already in an ability to show a baseline and show the differences. So when we see a reduction 2022 to 2021, we know that's a fair analysis because we've been contributing to NIBRS for several years, so that we're using the same numbers, the same categorization. Our clearance rate also has an increase of 4%, which is good. So even for the crimes that do occur, we've slightly increased the clearance of those crimes, which is also important for the public and the community because our ability to solve those crimes also contributes to an enhanced public safety. And that, again, is the partnership between the police and the community in solving those crimes. So we're doing well there, but we want to obviously increase that number going forward. The other thing that's interesting in this data, that even though crime went down and our clearance rate went up a little bit, almost all of the arrests went down. And so in total, they went down per 100,000 population. So we have an increase in juvenile arrests, but overall we have a decrease. So fewer arrests and reduction in crime. I think you can kind of take away from that the folks that are responsible for a lot of crime are basically being identified and are being placed in custody. That has an effect on the overall crime rate. That's good. And the juvenile arrest is something that we haven't delved into why that's a higher number, but we have seen, not just in Fargo, but nationally, a huge increase in juveniles involved in motor vehicle thefts. And that's where, if I had to guess, a lot of those juvenile arrests occur in that area. So that's been something that's been happening for some time. This goes back to the shots fired analysis that we talked about. And again, there's your definition of what shots fired is. So again, looking at 2022 to 2021, we had a slight increase in the number of those incidents compared to 2021. And then our shootings, we have same amount. We had 7 shooting incidents in 2021 with 9 victims. 4 of those were cleared by arrest. In 2022, we had 7 incidents with 8 victims. 6 of those, all but 1, and we've actually got a suspect in the last one, are cleared by arrest. So while we would like to see 0 shootings, just like murders, we would like to see 0. For the ones that do occur, we have a very good success rate of locating, identifying, and arresting those that were involved. And then our murders, 2021, we had 5 incidents with 6 victims, 4 cleared by arrest. And in 2022, we had 4 incidents with 5 victims, 3 cleared by arrest, and the last one is still under investigation. So again, pretty good on the clearance rate, slight reduction in overall incidents and number of victims. And again, just to define the murder category, it's the intentional killing of one human by another. This is not, and same thing with shootings and shots fired. Suicide is not a crime. It doesn't count in any of those crime categories. Accidentally shooting yourself doesn't count in the crime category and things of that nature. So those are not numbers that are anywhere calculated in this in the crime analysis. And then we started finding a better way to monitor or report out data on our mental health calls for service. It's been a conversation from the commission even for some time. With our intelligence and analysis unit now, we were able to put a new call code in and get the officers to start using that call code that would identify calls they were sent for that were purely mental health related calls, meaning, for example, we would get sent to a property damage, someone broke a window out. And we would get there and the person involved in breaking out the window was in mental health crisis. When they're in a mental health crisis, by law, they're not able to formulate the intent to commit a crime, so we're not arresting them, we're referring them for mental health services and all of the things that requires, and then going from there. But there's an awful lot of those calls, and in our community, we've recognized for some time that we have a large amount of those, and it's taken a lot of our resources. So we're able now to better categorize and display how much time and what's that involved. And so the first 4 months of that analysis, November of 22 through February of 23, our department responded to just under 28,000 calls for service. Just under 1,995 of those were actually mental health related calls. Of those 995, excuse me, 257 of those calls involved the same 10 individuals. So 26% of those calls are the same 10 individuals who we are continually having to deal with, and in which the police department and public health and whatever medical facilities we have are incapable of doing anything different, providing any level of service, treatment, or facility than we already have. So essentially, we're responding, we're spending significant time and resources to address the mental health crisis, take them to the appropriate service. They may or may not spend a short term there, 24 to 72 hours, or they may be out right away. Still in mental crisis, they go right back and we're getting sent to similar or different calls involving these same people. So for example, one person alone in that 4-month time frame was responsible for 53 calls for service. We started actually calculating how many personnel and how many hours. That's forthcoming in our March report, but it's significant. So I don't have the slide up for March, but March alone, looking again at our 10 most frequent calls for service involving the same persons in mental health crisis, we have utilized almost 400 officers at different times because many of those calls involve multiple officers. We've had some questions just in general at some of our sessions about why there's more than one officer at a call. These mental health calls that we respond to often require more than one officer because of the situation, the dangerousness. Simple example that just happened a few weeks ago at Dempsey's, if you remember, there was a call for service. It was reported to us that there was an individual inside who was armed with a handgun and was walking around the facility, and everyone, of course, was very scared. As we got there, they started acquiring information that this individual may be in some kind of mental health crisis, but we still don't know if he's armed or not. That one incident required numerous officers to respond and quite some time to actually de-escalate so that we could safely engage with this individual, get the people out of the tavern without causing them any harm, and then at the end of it to find out that this individual is not armed in any way. He's in mental health crisis, and then we, of course, took him to mental health services and went from there. There was no crime, there's no arrest made, but there's significant law enforcement time spent on that situation, and that is not unlike all of the calls that you see in those numbers before you. And I think that's what is unknown to a lot of people in terms of that whole situation. And as we've discussed with the commission and with others, we really need to have some additional mental health facility or services above and beyond what we have in our region so that we could, all of us, public health, the community could get some assistance there, because this is not good for the people in mental health crisis either, to be just continually revolved around these minimal resources and then right back out, and our officers in the position where they have to, again, de-escalate these things And any one of these could take a terrible turn. So that was the main gist of the mental health calls and that discussion. And we've had some additional discussions since then, and some folks from the community who have contacted us who are interested, and we have met with some of our public health and the mayor and city administrator on the issue too, to start some discussions around what we might be able to do to assist in that area. And then the last piece we talked about was the overdose situation, which is also pretty significant. We've got, so that's February, yeah. So we have 5 fatalities. Actually, it's 7 fatalities now so far this year. And 15, I think it's 24 total overdoses. I believe, if I remember correctly, I was just looking at the March report before I came. But if you look at that, the fatalities, that's one of the highest 2-month fatality rates that we've had in the last 5 years. And the numbers continue to climb. So this is also an area that there's not much conversation around. We don't have any new options in terms of dealing with this. We've got a lot of people who are in an addicted state, and there's a lot of people that are dying in our community. I mean, the total number over the last 5 years, if my math is correct, if I remember, is about 96 people since 2019 that have died just in our city from overdose, poisonings, and deaths. And that's a significant number. So again, we're, just in terms of public information and knowledge, but also to bring it to everyone's attention. And really, again, trying to seek out some other options for addiction treatment. And with these opioids, they are so physiologically addicting that outpatient treatment is not successful. It's just too difficult. If it's physiologically got a hold of people, there's got to be some different alternatives. And again, we don't have that answer on the law enforcement side, but I can tell you unequivocally that what we're doing isn't making this any better. And that, coupled with the huge influx in opioids across the country, we are overwhelmed by the supply. The folks who are addicted have many options to acquire these things, and it's not going in the right direction. So we just, our intent was really just to bring that forward for public discussion and knowledge. But again, that's stuff that our police department is also dealing with, because we go to those calls, just like fire and the hospitals, and are administering Narcan, and are dealing with the notifications to families on the deaths and things of that nature. And we're seeing that firsthand, and that's not talked about much. But if we had 96 homicides in 5 years, we probably would have a lot of conversation. So just, again, trying to open those avenues of discussion. A couple other updates that were presented. We are in the process of interviewing for a victim advocate. This is something that was identified in our strategic plan, and it's been a gap for the department for a long time. We have no one in that position, and we pretty much rely on our officers, detectives, and investigators to kind of maintain victim contact. Well, the volume of crimes that the investigations level is dealing with, that isn't always done from a time constraint position as much as anyone would like. And so that was an identified gap. And we are in the process of interviewing candidates. We hope to have someone in place mid to late May to begin that, basically start that position. I think we all would anticipate that's a growing area for the department as well. The victim advocacy piece, that will help a lot with that connectivity and making sure that victims know what's going on with their cases. And I think also to help bridge the gap between the police and the community in terms of how cases are investigated, what the legal process is, what can and can't be done from the police perspective. And again, just better educate the community and victims and help them as best we can through the justice system. And then there was some other discussion about a landlord and tenant position, which we are working with planning and development. That's kind of where a position like that should go. And they could also, from that position, offer landlord and tenant training, that type of thing, and then deal with crimes that are committed in public housing, and or if you're a landlord or tenant and you're interested in knowing if the police were at your residence or your building, a mechanism for you to follow up and get those reports. So that's just a position outside of the department, but it was asked of us at some point. Apparently back years ago, there was a position in the department that did that work, but we've identified that really it belongs in the planning and development area. And that's it for the report, absent any questions.
I have one in regards to the mental health conversation. Have you guys been looking into, like a mental health response team, to kind of help reduce the number of officer?
So we
contacts?
have mobile crisis. Basically, the resources that we have are being maxed. These situations that we're talking about, we can't send a civilian to. These people are in extreme mental health crisis, and they can be dangerous. These are not calls that we could send civilians to. And to the extent we can, we utilize and work with our mobile crisis and harm reduction team. We have collaborations with Southeast, actually for some of these very same people in that top 10. And Southeast is unable to do anything more for them as well. And that's when I say we've exhausted available resources, that's exactly what's going on. So the intervention, the things that you're asking about, civilian mobile crisis and things like that, where cops don't have to go, is already utilized to the extent it can be. And we don't even have enough people, if they wanted to do that on a 24/7 basis, to staff it. And these nature of these calls, a lot of times you just don't know how they're going to go unless you happen to know who the person is ahead of time. Then we probably know. But I think we're doing everything we can on both the PD and the public health side of it to address it. But we have a gap at the end for those folks who are in this cycle where nothing more can be done for them, yet we're not solving their problem, and they are continuing to go into crisis, have contact with the police, and it's just the revolving door for them.
So again, kind of like it's a problem. I'm sure it's not just in Fargo either. I'm sure this is.
No, this is a national issue.
Yeah, it's a national issue and a state issue, and clearly
Yes.
there's not enough mental health resources in North Dakota to manage.
I would agree with you.
Our
At
mental
least not
health
regional. And I
population.
think, the other suggestion that we've made on this is to have something regionally. We've got a large population in the Fargo-Moorhead area. As it stands, the state has one facility that's got very limited space that's in the middle of the state. And so I think people receiving that mental health treatment, regional treatment, I would imagine even from a practitioner standpoint would have to say that best practice would be to have them near where their other support mechanisms are and not far away where people can't even go and visit them while they're receiving their treatment. So I think that is a larger statewide issue that we hope at some point legislators take an interest in.
So in the meantime, you're probably staffing accordingly, or can you staff accordingly? I mean, if you have the same people calling and you're going to the same places and it's taking these resources, I mean.
Yeah, you can't really staff for it.
Right.
It's not consistent.
Can't like staff for
And
cutie
it's not
like
even the
at a
same places.
hospital.
It's the same people.
Yeah.
Different places, different
Right.
times. Yeah, I mean, it's, it happens when it happens.
All right.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Questions? We're all good? All right. Is there any other business? Any other business? Anything else? All right. Well, hearing none, I will I'll call the April 13th, 2023 meeting of the Police Advisory Board. I'll have it stand adjourned.